welcome to Unbiased Science,
where we bring scientific method to the madness.
We're your hosts, Dr. Jess Steier
and Dr. Sarah Scheinman.
And I'm not going to lie, today my public health heart is a flutter right now. We are going to have a conversation with the FDA, the U.S. Public Health Regulatory Agency. We are extremely honored and excited to welcome Dr. Namandjé Bumpus. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So before we dig in, we have lots of questions. I'd like to read a little bit of a bio. So let me pull that up real quick. Dr. Namandjé Bumpus became the FDA's Principal Deputy Commissioner on February 1st, 2024. In this role, she works closely with FDA leadership to develop, advance, and implement key public health initiatives, as well as to oversee the agency's day-to-day functions. Chief among those priorities is the reorganization unifying the Human Foods Program, creating a new model for the Office of Regulatory Affairs, and strengthening the entire agency. Dr. Bumpus has played an integral leadership role in the implementation and change management group and will provide seamless transition for this critical modernization effort. Again, Dr. Bumpus, thanks so much again for joining us. If I could just jump in with a question, because I think inquiring minds want to know. So can you walk us through your academic and professional journey that led to your current role as the FDA's principal?
Yes, sure. And before I became the FDA Principal Deputy Commissioner, I came here originally as the Chief Scientist in August 2022. So my background academically starts with a bachelor's degree in biology at Occidental College in Los Angeles. I wanted to be a scientist my whole life from the time I was about 5 years old, and so was really excited to get to pursue that. After Occidental, I went to graduate school at the University of Michigan and earned a PhD in pharmacology, which is really the biology of drugs, studying how medicines and drugs work. So it's a separate discipline from pharmacy, which people ask me a lot. I went on and did a postdoctoral fellowship at the Scripps Research Institute in La Jolla, California, in molecular and experimental medicine, and then did an international search for faculty positions, landed one at Johns Hopkins Medicine, and was on the faculty at Johns Hopkins for 12 years. By the time I was kind of ending my time there before I transitioned to FDA for a couple of years, I'd been chair of the Department of Pharmacology at Hopkins and also a full endowed professor. I previously served as Associate Dean for Basic Research at Johns Hopkins Medicine as well. So really loved being there, did research mostly focused on HIV drug development, understanding mechanisms of drug toxicity, developing advanced bioanalytical methods. And when this opportunity at FDA to be chief scientist came up, it seemed like maybe a once in a lifetime opportunity to really take the science that I love and expand the impact I could have on public health and impact my ability to serve people. So I came here, as I mentioned, August 2022 as chief scientist, and through that role really helped to lead our scientific portfolio at the agency and advance our research and help the public know we are a science-based agency. And in February was able to take on the role, as you mentioned, of Principal Deputy Commissioner. So it's been quite a journey, but science has really been my guiding light ever since I was a little girl.
So no big deal. You're not ambitious at all.
My jaw is on the floor right now. I can think of no one better to be at the helm of this thing. It gives me so much pleasure to know that you have such a rich background in pharmacology and basic science. I love that. Mm-hmm. As a basic scientist myself, I mean, bravo.
It's so important. I think people think of the FDA, they don't think of a basic scientist really being in a leadership role, but that, connectivity of understanding how things work at a really mechanistic level and being able to translate and think about it, not only does it help, I think, from the kind of broader lens of just biomedicine and think about the various types of products that we deal with, but even just the operational standpoint, I found that being able to lead a research program and think about that from start to finish, the operational components have really helped me with leading the agency and working with the commissioner on all of our initiatives and just the day-to-day management of the agency as well. So it translates well, I think, being a basic scientist to doing these types
and
of
I've always said there needs to be more of a bridge between the basic scientists of the world and the public health folks. We need to sort of find a way to unite the micro and macro levels of science.
That's why we work so well, Sarah. So, Dr. Bumpus, you were describing your time in academia. So what inspired that transition from academia to this leadership role at the FDA?
Yeah, I really did not think that I would leave academia. I love being a department chair. I love my department, still do. The research, having students in the laboratory, watching them grow from entering as a first year student, becoming a PhD candidate, and then graduating and being the world expert in their project. Thinking of ideas that I haven't thought of, and any question I asked them, being able to say, I've already done that before. That was really rewarding, and I love that experience. So I didn't think I would ever switch, but the FDA is such an important role in, public health, really broadly defined. I mean, it's everything from medicines and vaccines and food and cosmetics, tobacco regulation, that the opportunity to come here in a scientific position as chief scientist just seemed like, again, like something once in a lifetime. And the people here are so dedicated to what they do in the mission. They are really here for service. And our scientists are not only top-notch, world-leading experts, but are all about how can I really use my science to serve others and to help advance the health of others and advance public health. So it just seemed like I couldn't pass up that opportunity, and I was really glad to be offered the chance. And now in this new role that I have, it's not so new, I guess, but the second role I've had, Principal Deputy Commissioner, it gives me the opportunity to work with people at the agency in a much broader way, where I'm thinking about, things that we do even beyond the details of the science, and that's been really rewarding too.
Totally.
Sarah, I know you had a question about pharmacology. Did you want to?
Yeah, I wanted to know, you touched on this a little bit already, but I did want to know how your background in pharmacology specifically influences your approach to your current position.
A lot of the science that we do in pharmacology does touch on all these areas. So a lot of the work that I did as a pharmacologist was thinking about not only kind of the mechanism of how a drug worked, the biochemistry, the molecular pharmacology, but even things like adverse events. What's the mechanism of that? If someone has a toxicity, why? We looked at, are there genetic differences? Are there maybe genes that could underlie that for some reason? And then if so, what would the mechanism be there? So here you think about food and, chemical safety. A lot of that it's similar. It's the same types of methods to think about what is the biology? What's the action here on cells, on organs, on a whole organism? That's what we do in pharmacology, thinking about all of the medical products similarly. So it translates really well. And I hope that we have people who have that basic science focus and background, that laboratorian background, that really can realize that the work that they're doing, sometimes it can seem very focused, and it is. You're looking often at, something very deeply at one topic or issue, that you really can expand that and apply it to so many other things. And I think so often as basic scientists, we're not necessarily encouraged that way. I remember for me, I felt like, well, I'm an expert on this protein. That's what I'm supposed to talk about.
Right.
But you realize what you know can be applied to so many other things, and that you have so much to offer. You've done things and looked at things and done experiments that other people have not done, and you bring that to the table. So through my role, it's not just, the work and the application of pharmacology, but I really hope that I can inspire our younger scientists to know you can go broader with what you're doing if that's what you're interested in. And even our scientists, the agency, to know there are leadership roles for you that you can fill and have an impact that may be beyond what you expected, maybe beyond the lab, for instance.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's one of my favorite things about being a scientist is that when you're trained as a scientist, you're not necessarily, you are trained in a very specific and narrow range of subjects, and you are an expert on, like you said, like that one protein, but you're also trained how to learn and how to consume information and dissect it and just draw informed conclusions based on data. And I think that's the most powerful thing about the type of training that we received.
Yeah, We can apply that to so many things. And I think that we've got to, step into that and feel comfort that we can do that.
Love that. So, Dr. Bumpus, you mentioned a bunch of different things. The FDA is doing a lot. You mentioned drugs, you mentioned vaccines and foods and cosmetics and all the things. So, can you walk us through, maybe give an overview of the different offices and centers at the FDA?
Sure. So we are made up of a range of offices and centers, and I can tell you a little bit about some of them. So, for instance, we have our Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research. That's where a lot of the work around regulation and also they do science of vaccines and biologics happens. We have our Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, CEDAR, which is, as you can see in the title, drugs, where we're looking at regulation of drugs, and also they have science that goes on there too, and many scientists that work in all of these centers. We have a Center for Devices and Radiological Health, and that group is looking at devices and diagnostics, for instance. We have now a human foods program, which is new as of October 1st. We have a unified human foods program. And so that's where we have not only kind of the regulatory aspects around foods, but also we have labs, for instance, that do testing around food safety. So that is the space for everything that you would think about in human food, at least, is happening in our human foods program. We have the Center for Veterinary Medicine. That's where we have animal products, animal medicines, for instance, being regulated. And I'll say again, all of these groups have scientists working there in various functions. Their decisions they're making are science-based. We have laboratories within all of these groups that are doing kind of general research around things like quality and safety. So that's really important. We have our Office of Inspections and Investigations, which is also new since October 1st. It used to be the Office of Regulatory Affairs. And that's where we have our investigators who are doing work as far as inspections of, say, various facilities that are involved in say, manufacture, for instance, of products that we regulate. We have the Office of Commissioner, where there's a lot of coordination around cross-cutting activities, but within that, there are lots of other groups. Near and dear to my heart, of course, is Office of the Chief Scientist, and the Office of the Chief Scientist has a research component called the National Center for Toxicological Research. That's in Jefferson, Arkansas, and those are hundreds of scientists working on really cutting-edge work, both in the laboratory, as far as toxicology type-related work, and they also do other things like bioinformatics and silico-based approaches to try to make predictions for experimental outcomes. So we have that research component. They also have testing labs that do testing of medical products and tobacco and other products as well, some cross-cutting work in foods and devices. And we have the cosmetics group, the Office of Cosmetics and Colors, that not only has laboratories that do color testing across all of our products, but they also do cosmetics regulation. And one thing that was really interesting to me when I learned about cosmetics at FDA, when I was chief scientist and really leading effort around cosmetics regulation, that the way we define cosmetics, they encompass a lot of different products. So we say on average, each adult in the US uses 6 to 12 cosmetics because it's lots of things. It's things like baby wipes, shaving cream. It's really broadly defined. So it makes it really important, that work that we're doing, the agency, and the fact that cosmetics is in this scientific organization, also the chief scientist. It allows us to think about this broad range of products and really, what are the ingredients? What do we know about them scientifically? So that was an interesting move we made with this reorganization that you mentioned, that I think also strengthens our ability to protect public health.
Okay, so Dr. Bumpus, a question that we get quite a bit is about the drug approval process. So can you sort of outline some of the major steps in that process from the initial research to market availability?
Yes. So say a drug company, for instance, that's seeking to sell a drug in the United States, they have to first test it. And so there's laboratory testing that happens to understand how a drug works, and also to understand if it's likely to be safe and work well in humans. And so those are things that really are happening within the lab. There's also animal testing that's done often as part of that. And so once the company has, been able to do this testing, they'll send CDER that we talked about, our Center for Drugs, the evidence from these tests to prove that the drug is safe and effective for its intended use. And then within CDER, we have a team of scientists spanning disciplines like chemists, pharmacologists. We have physicians, we have statisticians, really a broad range of experts who together review the company's data and propose labeling of the product. And so that review that they do within our Center for Drugs is really independent, unbiased review by these experts. I mentioned scientists, physicians, statisticians. And that review really establishes that a drug's health benefits outweighs its known risks. And the drug, if that's the case, the drug can then go forward. It's approved for sale. And so they're also looking at if the drug will be manufactured in compliance with current good manufacturing practice. That's also important. So that's kind of like an overview of the process. But one thing to note, our center, and they're not actually testing the drug itself. They're not doing these tests itself, but they do conduct general research in areas I mentioned before, such as drug quality, safety, effectiveness standards. So they have all of this expertise that they bring, not only from experience reviewing these data, but we do generate knowledge within the agency around these general areas. And that all then is applied as we're doing these reviews. I think that's important to know. I think that there can sometimes be a perception that we are, passively receiving information and then making a decision, but there's a lot of engagement. We have deep expertise in these areas. And we also, because of the work we do, there are scientific questions that we are really uniquely positioned to be aware of and to think about. So we always have ongoing research going on in general areas that inform our decision making, underlie it, and keep our scientists really at the forefront of their fields, because I mentioned we have many people that are generating knowledge as well that we use and that other people use within the broader scientific community too. So I think that's important to know.
And I think it's also like very comforting to know that someone who has experience doing the legwork for these types of studies like yourself is sort of overseeing the whole process at the meta level.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
There's a lot of deep experience here. Definitely. It's amazing.
I think it's so important to have experience like at all of those levels.
Totally. Yes. So Dr. Bumpus, you walked us through the process. What about after a product is on the market? So post-market surveillance, is there any monitoring that's going on for safety and efficacy even after a drug has hit the market?
Mm-hmm. So I mentioned briefly when we walked through kind of our offices, we have a group of investigators that do inspections, for instance. So in addition to inspecting drug manufacturing facilities, we also maintain a system of post-market surveillance and risk assessment programs that we use to identify and evaluate adverse drug reactions and medication errors that do not appear during the drug development process. So we do keep up this monitoring to really understand, what's happening post-market. And through that, we're able to learn more, for instance, about adverse drug reactions. So as part of this effort, we receive and analyze reports of adverse events. And an adverse event would be, a problem that patients have after they take the drug, regardless of whether the drug caused the event or not. We're collecting all that information. And then through that, we can determine if these adverse events were caused by a drug. So our Center for Drugs uses these reports along with other sources of drug safety data to monitor the safety of drugs, approved drugs, and also for therapeutic biologic products. So an important piece, part of our reorganization with the development of OII, this Office of Inspections and Investigations, really is to strengthen our inspectorate and allow for, just kind of enhancing and continuing to build that inspection process that we have, which is really important. And then in addition, we have these systems in place within the center to monitor adverse events and really think about and analyze those data and try to understand what we might learn about the drug and what types of things might be caused by the drug. And if there are any new potential safety issues that are identified, FDA conducts a thorough and rigorous review of available data before determining that. And then we may take, certain actions as appropriate from there. But we do continue to monitor, especially through adverse event reporting and then through inspections as well.
So, Dr. Bumpus, I want to be mindful of time here. I think there's something that we really need to get into, and that is building trust in government agencies. So, there's often public skepticism about government agencies. So, what would you like people to know? What's something you would like them to hear that you think maybe they don't know about the FDA's commitment to public health and safety?
I think a primary thing that I want people to know is what I've been touching upon, that we are, as you mentioned, science-based. We make our decisions based on science, and then we have experts here who really understand the disciplines they're working in, the details, who often have, expertise and as I mentioned, generated knowledge in those areas that is, really second to none. And that we're bringing all that to bear when we make our decisions. And that, our decisions that we're making are made by our scientists, physicians, others, and, that we're civil servants, that we are really focused on the service that we're trying to do to the public and to public health, and that we're leveraging these disciplines that we've been studying for decades to try to do that. So I really want people to understand the commitment that we have, that, we're civil servants who are here because this is what we want to do. We want to serve the public. We love the agency and the public health mission. You cannot beat our mission. It's so important. And that we have really world-class scientists here, physician scientists, statisticians, and our other folks too that we have that might be legal and policy experts, for instance. These are all world-class people who are here because they want to do this public service. They want to advance public health and serve the mission, and that we have a real focus on the common good.
Oh, my goodness, I'm dying right now. Literal goosebumps. Really, this is incredible. So can you maybe share an example of how the FDA's work has directly benefited public health, maybe in a way that's perhaps not widely known?
Yeah, I think there are several ways. So one of the more visible things we've worked on is the nutrition facts label. So the impact of bad nutrition on public health, of course, is profound, but with nutrition facts labels, people have access to the information they need to make informed choices when buying food. In the context of opioids, FDA supported innovation on and availability of Narcan, which is now available over the counter and in lots of different forms, including a nasal spray. There are lots of things that we work on as far as health equity. It's very important to us. We, for instance, in our Center for Devices, been working on an initiative called Home as a Healthcare Hub, and it's really been designed to help reimagine the home environment as an integral part of the healthcare system and to address some basic social and economic issues and supply and demand problems related to healthcare. So, for instance, primary care health deserts. There's, of course, an increasing physician shortage has been persistent, and hospital and clinic closures and things that can impact people, particularly in rural parts of the United States. So how can we think about bringing healthcare to people? That's something that's really essential to the work we're doing. So we have that Home as a Healthcare Hub initiative in our Center for Devices. And more broadly, we're thinking about, clinical trial participation, for instance, and clinical trial diversity. And again, how do we bring the trials to people? So we know in rural areas, for instance, it may be more difficult to get access. So we have initiatives around thinking about how can we use more, digital health approaches, for instance, to make things more accessible to people. And by increasing that diversity in clinical trial participation, we know that we really strengthen our understanding of science, that there's so much more we know about biology than just by including more people and understanding more about, disease, natural history, even the biochemistry of diseases through the research that can be done. and the range of responses that people might have, for instance, to a medical product. So there's a lot that we're always doing. And a big part of it, hopefully, as you can tell, is really health equity, thinking about all people and how we serve all people. That's something that's really important to us, and I think is a common thread through the work that we do.
I mean, health equity is just good science. That's what I think.
Sarah, I love you. So, I mean, I have a zillion questions. If it's okay, I just have a few more for you. And of course, Sarah, please feel free to jump in. Public health scientist mind is buzzing right now, but it would be great. Can we just talk a little bit more about transparency? That's something that we get asked about quite a bit. So how does the FDA ensure transparency throughout the decision-making processes?
Yes, in a couple of ways. So I think one is, through our website that hopefully people check out, but we regularly use that as a tool to communicate the work that we do. And we have consumer-focused pages describing, for instance, exactly how the drug approval process works step by step. We have, when you go through that page, for example, it will tell you about various things, preclinical research, clinical research. You can click on preclinical research and see what that entails, or clinical research, and learn about the various phases of clinical trials and how those are all utilized. So we try to keep lots of information readily available to people about our various processes, our centers, and our initiatives through the website. So that would be one thing to check out. But we also use, things like public meetings, advisory committees. We have around 50 technical and scientific advisory committees. These are public meetings that are open. They give people the opportunity to hear from FDA, to hear from, other people in the field, people that would like to speak, and hear from healthcare providers, patients, for instance. So that's really a way that people can learn more about what we're doing and hear even about specific areas of work of specific products. We have a science board. Many people don't know. I wasn't really aware of it too long before I joined FDA, but we have a science board, for instance, that meets and talks about scientific issues at the agency. And this is a public meeting where you can hear presentations from FDA about the science we're doing, the questions that we're posing. And it's always on our website, the links to the meetings and, how you can join.
Wait, they're public?
They're public,
like
yes.
Anyone can go, so I could go?
You can participate, yes, you can go, you can listen in. And we have scientists from across the country in various sectors who are part of the science board, and they bring their knowledge and expertise and ask us great questions and help us think through things too. So there's a lot of opportunity, and a lot of it you can find through our website. We also post detailed meeting materials on our FDA.gov website too in advance for anyone to see.
That's so exciting. I want to go.
And you know what? So on our show notes, we'll post links to all of these things. Folks should definitely take a look at the FDA website. There is so much information on there. I feel like, folks just don't sometimes take the time to really navigate it, but you're putting out incredible information.
I mean, I had no idea, and I'm a scientist. I had no idea.
The more you know. All right. So, you mentioned the Human Foods Program. This sounds like something that you're passionate about. Can you maybe just tell us a little bit more about it and how it aims to strengthen the agency?
Yes, I'm very excited about the Human Foods Program. So, one great part of all this is that we have a Deputy Commissioner for Human Foods, Jim Jones, who's at the helm of it. And with that, he has, decades of experience that he's bringing to bear here and really the kind of food and food safety space. And that whole leadership team that he's building just has a lot of expertise that I think already is strengthening things. But the idea of having all of the food initiatives and efforts going on in offices under one umbrella gives us the opportunity to not only streamline decision-making, for instance, in foods, but increase collaboration. So in the scientific space, for instance, we had in one unit previous to development of the Human Foods Program, we had in one unit the labs that did food testing, for instance, looking at food safety testing. And in another unit, we had labs who were doing, research and some of the development of methods that the testing lab might use. And these folks, of course, all talked and interacted, but they were in different groups. And so that means that you're working through kind of different pathways and processes, for instance, and now they're under one umbrella. There's one kind of group, scientific group now that will integrate all of this. And I think that just means more of our scientists talking to each other, increased collaboration, really working with one vision in a way that you're able to do when you're together as a group instead of kind of working separately, but even no matter how collaborative you are. So I'm excited about that. There's a lot of kind of realignment that we were able to do of the science in the laboratories through this reorganization. And I think it's really going to boost the impact that we can make through science and hopefully give us even more stories that we can tell to the public about how we're using our science, our labs, and our research to really improve public health.
All right, Sarah, I'm hogging airtime. I'm sure you have questions. Please.
I have a question. The FDA, how is the FDA adapting to rapidly evolving technologies in drug development and testing? Because I mean, that's to me one of the most exciting things about being a scientist is just how rapidly the biotechnology is advancing and how many more things we can do now than we could even do like a year ago or even 6 months ago. And so I'm wondering how is the FDA adapting to this technology change and boom?
In lots of ways. One, of course, you recruiting in talent that have the expertise, but two, building some of those tools and that work internally. So there are a couple of areas scientifically that I've been excited about that we are working to advance that I think really kind of reflect the type of innovations you're talking about. So one would be AI, for instance. So we have initiatives around development of alternatives to animal testing. We call these alternative methods or new alternative methods. And the idea being that, can we develop lab or in silico based approaches that can be used to replace, reduce, or refine the use of animals in certain instances? Mm-hmm. And so we at our National Center for Toxicological Research, for instance, in collaboration with other scientists at the agency, have developed AI based approaches to make some of these predictions. So for instance, they use virtual rats that they've developed. And so they train these models with available data and are able to show that they can actually develop algorithms that are pretty robust in making preclinical predictions. So we're always looking to increase our collaboration with scientists so we can bring in more data and train them more. But I think that is one area where there's a lot that can be done. How can we use AI for things like, cleanup and quality assurance of data, of course, but even making predictions so that maybe I can refine the experiments that I do, helping me do that planning and think things through, based on this model they've been developed. So I think that's one place where we're embracing it internally and we're trying to advance that. Another space are organs on a chip. So, microchips people are using to kind of mimic organs. And we have work on that in many major organs, liver on a chip, brain on a chip, at a basic science level, but trying to understand if these also can be used in a sense to make some predictions. And of course, there are interesting challenges you face there, right? Like organs talk to each other. So how do we make these chips talk to each other? Right. But there are a lot of interesting things to do there. And we're doing that work internally, also with collaboration with scientists externally. And these are just some of the ways that we're, trying to be at the forefront of where the science is and do our part in advancing it as we can through collaboration and then, our own work as well.
So cool.
That really is incredible. Dr. Bumpus, this is a big question. And I don't know, I'm sure you have a lot to say about this, but what would you say some of the biggest challenges facing the FDA, but also just generally public health? And are there steps being taken to try to address some of those challenges?
Yes, I think there are a range of things to think about. So one, certainly, I think what we're just discussing, how do we ensure that we are keeping up with technologies and at the forefront? A lot of that is also infrastructure. If we're talking about AI, how do we ensure that we continue to have an IT infrastructure that can not only do the work, internally that we need to do as far as whatever AI research we might do, for instance, but handle the data, the magnitude of data that are coming into us with these applications, for instance, we have big data involved and it's only going to increase. So how do we ensure that we continue to have the internal expertise and the infrastructure to be able to keep pace with that and to have expertise and maintain and to augment that expertise. So that's one thing. I think about our workforce too. For me, that's top of mind. How do we really encourage the folks who are undergrads now, or even in high school looking towards undergrads? How do we encourage them as far as thinking about FDA as a viable, exciting, rewarding career? It's not something that everyone knows about. So how do we do that? And we have some really important roles to fill, even things I talked about, our investigators that do inspections. How do we ensure that we have a group of people there who are, knowledgeable about FDA, knowledgeable that that's a pathway, that's an option, and, have some scientific interest and background and, take on that work. So there are a lot of areas where we need to ensure that we are educating people about it being an option for them, and I think encouraging people to pursue careers at FDA. So the workforce, I think, is a really huge one, certainly. But there are, lots of things. I think we're seeing, new modalities as far as development of medical products, and thinking about all the potential combinations and things you'll see. And, that means just continuing to stay where we are, as far as being experts, but ensuring that we're always able to bring the best people. As far as that public trust, I think that's really key too. How do we continue to build that so people really look to us in that way? Our advisory committees, I mentioned, are a key part to that. And I think an important challenge is ensuring that in that space, for instance, that we're able to get the key experts that we really need to give us the advice we need to really make good decisions. So I think a lot of this comes down to people and, how we get people internally, and also people to work with us externally that we need, so that we're ready for anything that we might face, even that's unpredictable as far as public health.
Well, I'm blown away by your story, your journey, the work that the FDA is doing. I think that this conversation is so important because it's very easy for people to forget. You hear the FDA is an agency. You forget about all the people, the humans, the scientists who are there, their heart driven by this dedication to helping people lead healthier lives. So this is really, really incredible and an honor. Any last things you wish to share before we wrap up, Dr. Bumpus?
Well, as far as the people, I don't know if we mentioned, we're nearly 20,000 people strong. So
wow,
we are, quite a group. And as you mentioned, just so committed and dedicated and so much expertise. It's really a wonderful place to be. So I hope people check us out, either think about joining us or just learning more about our work and what we do. That, that's very useful to us too, as we work toward our mission, just people understanding us.
Well, thank you. Thank you to all 20,000-ish folks who are at the FDA. And thank you so very much for all you do in the name of public health. Really, this is such an honor to have you on the podcast.
And in the name of science in general.
Yes. Sorry. I'm partial to public health science, but yes, you're absolutely right.
He's a pharmacologist first and foremost.
Okay, I get it, Sarah. I'm sorry. All right. Well, thank you all for tuning in and for your support of Unbiased Science. Of course, you can follow along on social media where we share our evidence-based infographics every day. Obviously, you know about the podcast. And we also have a newsletter where it allows us to do deep dives with all of our sources cited on lots of topics that you ask about. Sarah, please take us home.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We hoped you learned a thing or two. I certainly did. Please join us next week on your trusted source for no nonsense, just science.